Hey guys, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Today I'm going to be reacting to Lenin's death and Stalin's rise to power between two wars, 1924, part 1 of 1 by Time Ghost History. If you want to check out my previous reaction to other Time Ghost History videos, remember the playlist card will be at the top. Just click on it and you'll be able to access them. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
On January 21st, 1924, after a long illness, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov dies at the age of 53. He is better known under the pseudonym Lenin, and since 1917, he's been the leader of Bolshevik Russia. Lenin's death sets off a struggle for power and consolidation in the newly formed Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. When that struggle is over, it will leave one man as dictator of the Soviet Union. He is Joseph Stalin. Welcome to Between Two Wars, a summary of the interwar years, from the uncertainty and hedonism of the 1920s to humanity's descent into the darkness of the Second World War. I'm Indy Nidell. The son of a serf that rose to the lower nobility in Imperial Russia, Lenin is already a convinced socialist by his late teens, and as he studies law in his early 20s, he develops into a radical, revolutionary Marxist. Around the turn of the century, he is an activist writer for the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, RSDLP, the main Marxist party of Russia. Within the party, he advocates insurrection and the violent overthrow of the establishment. Russia at this point is divided between a massive population of have-nots and a tiny group of entitled landowners and nobility. There's a huge peasant class, many of which are subsistence farmers, and a small but growing working class. The Tsarist rulers keep their grip on society by strictly policing all kinds of extremism. As a result, Lenin spends his early political career in and out of prison and mostly in exile. Around 1901, he becomes one of the leaders of a party majority within the leadership, the majoritarians, for which the word is Bolsheviki in Russian. They want a highly organized and structured party with military discipline. They're opposed by a party leadership minority, the minoritarians in Russia, Mensheviki, who want an open, less hierarchical, and more inclusive party. The Bolsheviks...
Yeah, I wish they won whatever debate or politics or some sort of voting that happened during that time. I just wish that the minority would have won this instead of the majority Bolsheviks, because now we know what the Bolsheviks did. You know, the tyranny, the destruction, the killing of innocent people. For what? We don't know why.
Bolsheviks are also the majority of contributors to the party publication Iskra, where Lenin is one of the main writers. There, he gets to know Lev Davidovich Bronstein, better known as Leon Trotsky, a name he supposedly chose.
What's with the hook? That's quite interesting. I'd never wear glasses like that, but yeah, it's quite interesting.
Because it was the name of one of his jailers in Odessa prison, and he thought it sounded cool. Lenin's name supposedly came from the river Lena. Why all the pseudonyms? Well, not, as some who claim the Bolsheviks were a Jewish conspiracy, to hide Trotsky's Jewish background. It isn't a Jewish conspiracy. The Bolsheviks are pretty harshly anti-religious.
What Jewish conspiracy? Why? Why is there this obsession with the Jewish religion? Why? I don't understand. I honestly don't understand. First it was Germany, now it's also Russia. They have this obsession with this religion. It's insane.
This is for the obvious reason they keep being jailed for what they write. So to confuse the authorities, they use names that are not on record. It doesn't really work since the Tsarist secret police weren't quite that dumb, but this way, they at least get to choose catchy, cool names. Trotsky was born into a wealthy farming family in Ukraine. At boarding school, he discovers Marxism through his girlfriend and future wife. By the time he reaches adulthood, he's multilingual, speaking French, English, and German, as well as his native Russian and Ukrainian. He's also involved with union agitation and starts writing for the socialist cause, spends 2 years in prison, and then he's sentenced to 4 years exile in Siberia. In Siberia, he starts developing his own theories on Marxism and communism. In 1902, he escapes exile, leaving his wife behind, and heads for London, where he meets Lenin and joins the writing staff at Iskra. Although he's an admirer of Lenin already before they meet, he defies him the next year when he joins the Mensheviks, leading Lenin to call him out publicly as a Judas, scoundrel, and swine. The schism will last.
You know, like Trotsky and Lenin, they both went to Britain, right? They went to London. They see how society is that side of the world, if I can say that. They can see the governmental structures, the way the monarchy and the government is run in Britain. Why didn't they try to emulate that in Russia? Why didn't they try and do that? It's not perfect, but it's better. It is far better than what they wanted to do and what they actually did in Russia. It's far more better. People are not just dying for nothing. You know, yes, Britain has its problems, but at least the people are not dying for nothing, like how they're going to be dying when the Bolsheviks come into power.
Until the revolutions of 1917, a time when Trotsky refers to himself as a non-factional social democrat. Trotsky works tirelessly over the years to reconcile the party's warring factions, ironically managing to make enemies in all camps and becoming seen as an uncooperative troublemaker. One of the people he crosses in this period is a dashing, charismatic, adventurous Bolshevik, a violent criminal from Georgia, Yosef Yugashvili, better known as Joseph Stalin. One of his many code names based on the Russian word for steel. Stal, and with the suffix in, becomes something vaguely like man of steel. The son of an abusive alcoholic father, he grows up with his mother in the care of a priest who goes out of his way to give Stalin a proper education. By his late teens, though, Joseph starts hanging out with socialist revolutionary gangs, denounces God, and begins a wild existence on the road. He takes a prominent role in the organization of strikes and violent demonstrations in his hometown Tiflis, and by 1901 becomes a target for the secret police. He goes underground, continuing to organize violent uprisings. At 23, he's elected to the Central Committee of the Georgian branch of the RSDLP. But he's finally caught and also sent to exile in Siberia. In early 1904, he manages to escape and make it back to Tiflis, where he promptly becomes a supporter of the new Bolsheviks. In January 1905, when an abortive revolution begins in Russia, Stalin is in Baku on the Caspian Sea. He forms a battle squad to fight the police, carry out robberies, raid government facilities, and extort local businesses for protection money.
Is this to change the government? Is all of this criminal activity, killing people, stealing from people, extorting money, is it all for the bigger mission to change the government of Russia? Phew.
Also carry out attacks on Cossacks and the Tsarist militia in coordination with the Menshevik militia. He's arrested, exiled, escapes dressed as a woman, arrested again, escapes again, and so on, all while he expands his criminal activities. Now, all this sounds pretty cool, right? Well, it is not for his victims. His gang, now called the Outfit, kill hundreds of people during their heists and attacks. They even kidnap the children of wealthy citizens and hold them for ransom. And while they are ostensibly doing this for the cause of the revolution, they're also amassing wealth for themselves. That stands in stark contrast to Lenin, who lives an austere life, denying himself most creature comforts and any luxury, even as the money from Stalin's operations roll into the party coffers. In late 1905, the two finally meet during a party conference in Tampere, Finland, which was still part of the Russian Empire. Although Lenin has now managed to fill the Central Committee with only Bolsheviks, the Mensheviks are in the majority among regular members, and the Assembly votes to discontinue armed robberies and other criminal activities. Lenin sees a great need, though, for more money to assure success. That same evening, as the vote is passed, he meets in private with Stalin. They agree to set up a clandestine, secret operation to continue the criminal schemes. In 1907,
yeah. Am I surprised? Nope. Am I disappointed? Yes.
that operation reaches a new low when Stalin and his gang pull a complex heist to rob a money transport from the Imperial Bank in Tiflis. Armed with revolvers and grenades, the 20-man crew attacks the coach at Yerevan Square. Now, it's in the middle of the day, and the square is full of people. As they attack and the guards return fire, they start throwing their grenades. In the chaos, 40 people are killed, mainly innocent bystanders. All 20 gang members get away with a bounty of 342,000 rubles, which is more than 3.9 million US dollars in 2018. Immediately after the heist, though, both Stalin and Lenin will distance themselves from the whole affair, as its legitimacy becomes an issue of contention, even among the staunchest Bolsheviks. Once the Bolsheviks are in power, though, it will be glorified as a highlight in the revolutionary cause as part of reappropriating money from the Tsarist regime. Okay, Stalin and Lenin are now...
Yeah. It's really interesting. From a politician to a criminal and to a glorified hero from such criminal acts. You know, I understand protesting against the government. I understand attacking government facilities probably, but killing the innocent people, throwing grenades, like, no, man.
Brothers in crime and brothers in arms. And Stalin is invited to join the Central Committee by Lenin and Grigory Zinoviev, Lenin's aide-de-camp, who will be instrumental in Stalin's rise to power. Stalin is also involved with the publishing of Pravda, the Bolshevik official newspaper. Here, he gets to know Lev Kamenev, Trotsky's brother-in-law, who will be the first communist Russian head of state after the 1917 October Revolution. Kamenev will be another central piece of what will become Stalin's initial power base. Now, in late 1917 and early 1918, all of these men take control of Russia. I have covered this exhaustively on the Great War channel. The Russian Civil War follows that, which we have covered in this series. You can find links to all of those videos in the description. Throughout this period, Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin, Zinoviev, Kamenev, and a few other colorful characters will find themselves at odds over a number of issues. The relationship between Trotsky and Stalin will become especially contentious and will deteriorate to public scorn after their falling out over the Red Army failure at the Battle of Warsaw. But Lenin always manages to get them all back together to continue their reconquest of the Russian imperial lands and cement his version of Marxism, Leninism. But in his final years, Leninism becomes increasingly opposed to Joseph Stalin's worldview. Now, if you want to be really simple about it, Leninism is nothing else than a practical approach to achieve a communist state. As with all flavors of communism, the ultimate goal is the overthrow of capitalism in favor of a new order based on absolute equality, an abolition of social class, and an economic system based on communal ownership. While that might sound great on paper, it's very hard to imagine what that would be like in actuality.
Exactly. It sounds amazing on paper. It sounds like a utopian dream from maybe like Star Trek, you know. But in reality, humans are very selfish, very power hungry, you know, and very ambitious. These kind of things will just skewer this kind of utopian dream awry, and it will just never work, really. It just won't work.
It certainly isn't the way human society has naturally developed. However you achieve it, it would require a massive amount of planning and management. The proposal by Karl Marx was that socialism is an inevitable state of society that will evolve as the oppressed working classes rise up. Marx foresees a dictatorship of the proletariat that will follow the overthrow of the middle and upper classes, who in turn will eventually lead to a socialist society of harmonious equality. Marx does not, though, advocate this as a political movement, nor does he propose any solution as to how it could be made to happen.
So they hijacked Karl Marx's idea and they made it their own. They made it as a political ideal that needs to be achieved. And they don't really have a basic understanding on how to implement something so drastic. Because here Karl Marx, he doesn't have the solutions to how to implement this utopian dream. He's just saying that in the future, maybe people will uprise and they will take down the middle class and the upper class, but he doesn't know what happens after that. Politicians, dangerous people.
He just theorized that it would happen inevitably by itself. In fact, Marx was never fond of the idea of communism that grew out of his theories, and even distanced himself from being called a communist when the term was coined during his lifetime. And in any case, Marx thought this will only happen when industrialization reaches a critical point. A society still based largely on an agrarian economy, like Russia in 1917, is not really ripe for Marx's socialist revolution. But Lenin and other socialists that follow Marx's ideas see it as their task to make it practically possible, even accelerate this process and make it happen, without really considering the last point regarding the level of industrialization. Lenin thinks there must be a vanguard party to plan, initiate, and carry out the revolution, and then maintain the socialist state. This leads to a one-party system and justifies the abolition and repression of all other political parties, which in turn leads to a police state to enforce that ban. The dictatorship of the proletariat must be forced to power through a violent uprising, and for that, the goals justify the means. In other words, the persecution, oppression, incarceration, and murder of anyone opposing the revolution is justified. This directly leads to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people during the Revolution and the Civil War, on top of the millions that die as casualties in the conflicts themselves. Collectivism, or the joint ownership of all assets, leads to a nationalization of industry and appropriation of all private goods. Okay, this one fails catastrophically already during Lenin's life, and he then introduces the new economic plan in 1921, where private entrepreneurship is tolerated to a degree, though private venture capital is not allowed. That's regulated through a system of national banks that decide where to invest capital. Foreign trade remains a state monopoly.
And this will create a corrupt network system like nothing else. Really, people won't be able to achieve their dreams of like opening a business, having a financial security from that business, and able to expand that business across Russia. They won't be able to do that. Not unless, of course, they have the support of the current government, if they've rubbed or greased the hands of very important politicians and governors of these different banks. Like literally they are stifling the business environment, keeping it controlled under their thumb. And yeah, luckily the rest of the world didn't follow suit in this madness, I would say.
Dictatorship of the proletariat shall be upheld by centralized democracy through a system of independent, locally elected party committees, Soviets, that carry the voice of the people to a central committee which decides on the policy of the state based on an open debate. And believe it or not, Lenin actually practiced this during his entire tenure as leader of Soviet Russia.
Well, at least that's good. At least one thing.
But this was one of three major points of contention between Trotsky and Lenin on one side and Stalin on the other. See, Stalin opposes any democratic process whatsoever and sees the Central Committee as an autocratic, closed entity that simply dictates.
Why am I not surprised that the criminal will say no to any form of democracy? Why am I not surprised? Did we forget that when in his younger years he was a troublemaker? He was a person who, probably created or instigated or assisted in helping, to create these violent protests. And then he crossed over into criminal activities, creating a criminal gang that extorted money from people, that killed people, that abducted people, for ransom money as well. And Lenin also supported that kind of activity, making sure that his party, the Bolsheviks, could have the income to, continue operating. So this is not really a surprise, really. He's been like this for a very long time, and now that there's this new institution that is almost democratic in its way, that is being functioning under Lenin. Of course, Stalin won't agree to it because he doesn't have the power. Then the power belongs to the people, and that's not going to work with him. That's really not going to work with him.
The second point that they cannot agree on is self-determination. Lenin sees it as essential that the state shall be based on self-determination of the people. Now, this does not mean the same thing as people deciding to be independent nations, as self-determination is usually defined. It means that ethnic groups or regions shall have the free right to form a state within a union of socialist Soviet republics, a federal-based communism. And while Trotsky again agrees with Lenin, Stalin believes in nation-based communism. This is where Stalin and Lenin have their biggest falling out. When Stalin wants to force the Georgian, Armenian, and Azerbaijani autonomous republics to become one, Lenin accuses him of pursuing Russian chauvinism and his own self-interest. The last point, that has all three go in different directions, is how to carry out the international revolution. Now, this is not just an ideological issue. The communist idea includes the destruction of capitalism and a state monopoly on foreign trade, right? The absence of a market economy takes away the dynamics of foreign trade at competitive levels. So they need an increasing number of like-minded partners to trade with to avoid stagnation or even contraction in the economy. Lenin believes that must be forced by revolution, if need be from outside. Thus, he forms the Communist International, Comintern, to promote revolution all over the world. If that does not happen, then it will be by conquest. And there you have a big reason for his wars in Eastern Europe. Trotsky is less radical and believes the best way forward is opportunistic alliances with parties that arise naturally and are opposed to capitalist parties.
I agree with Trotsky. I agree with him. As much as I may not like what happened in terms of how Russia changed itself with the Bolsheviks coming into power and everything else like that, what Trotsky is saying here is far more understandable and logical. Let the people from other countries decide for themselves, what do they want. Do they want to continue on with the current system, or do they want to join this communist, this socialist international revolution? Let the people decide. If you start attacking people and force them to adopt your ideology, you're just going to make more enemies. You're going to make more enemies, you're going to create more wars. But I can see with Stalin, he doesn't really care about that. Remember, when he was younger, these are the kind of things he did to assume direct control, to amass more wealth, to amass more power. And that is through violence.
Stalin proposes alliances even with capitalist parties as long as it leads to increased international influences. As these conflicts deepen, Lenin's health starts to fail, and aware that he might be dying, he prepares his legacy. His main objective is to make sure that Stalin does not succeed him. By late 1921, Lenin suffers from bouts of debilitating headaches and oversensitive hearing and insomnia. He retires to his Gorky mansion for a month to convalesce. In April 1922, suspecting lead poisoning, doctors removed bullets still lodged in his bones after an assassination attempt in 1918. But his symptoms don't disappear. In May, he suffers a stroke that leaves him temporarily unable to speak and partially paralyzed. In October, he's back in Moscow, but suffers a second stroke in December and returns to Gorky. He begins to settle his affairs. He oversees a complete purge of all remaining Mensheviks, who are now removed from any function in the state or state enterprise. They're put in concentration camps where many will die from maltreatment. Lenin eradicates the remnants of the Socialist Revolutionary Party by having their entire leadership condemned to death.
Why would he do that? Why?
They're also put in concentration camps, but will not be executed until 15 years later during Stalin's Great Purge. And to secure his vision of federal socialism, Lenin drives through the foundation of the USSR over Stalin's resistance. On December 30th, 1922, Lenin becomes chairman of the new Federal Union, despite his increasing invalidity, though the rising star is Joseph Stalin. Lenin dictates his political testament in early 1923. In it, he issues a stark warning against letting Stalin succeed him and names Trotsky as his choice for succession instead. With Lenin only partly present, Stalin starts moving into position to take over. Aware of who his main competitor will be, he conspires against Trotsky with Zinoviev and Kamenev. In March 1923, Lenin suffers another stroke, losing his ability to speak and paralyzing his left side. By October, it looks like he's recovered somewhat and he goes to the Kremlin for a visit, but soon he's showing signs of sensory aphasia, not understanding written and spoken language correctly. He returns to Gorky, where on January 21st, 1924, he slips into a coma and dies. Despite their final animosity, Stalin knows that upholding the cult of personality that has grown around the leader of the revolution is essential to maintain his own justification for leadership. Russia descends into weeks of public mourning. Lenin's remains will be embalmed and put on public display in a mausoleum at the Kremlin, where in 2018 you can still go and view the body. The cult of Lenin will be carefully crafted and cultivated until the end of the USSR in 1991. There has been much debate regarding Lenin's cause of death. Was it the bullets lodged in his bones? Did he secretly suffer from syphilis? Was he gradually poisoned by Stalin? We will never know for certain. Although the body remains in the mausoleum, the chemicals and intrusive methods used in the embalming process made it impossible to make any conclusive biochemical autopsy. We do know that his arteries were severely sclerotic, and the most accepted medical analysis based on that, his symptoms, and his family's medical history indicates that he suffered from extremely heightened cholesterol levels, which eventually lead to cerebral sclerosis, critical hardening and blockage of the arteries of the brain. No matter what the reason, though, his death paves the way for Stalin's rise to power. Trotsky will not put up much of a fight against him, as it turns out, and with Zinoviev and Kamenev at his side, he will gradually maneuver himself into absolute power. In view of the incredible carnage that Russia and its dependencies have been subjected to during Lenin's time, it's hard to imagine that it can get any worse, but Stalin will manage to take it to new levels. If there was even the slightest bit of democracy in the Soviet system to begin with, Stalin will eradicate it. He will roll back the restorative measures of the new economic policy, deliberately launching famines that kill millions, even tens of millions of people.
Essentially, the man becomes king of the country without the title of a king or an emperor. He becomes the new king in all but name.
The incarceration of dissidents, ethnic oppression, and the assassination of political opponents will only increase. 3 of the victims will eventually be Kamenev, Zinoviev, and Trotsky. Last but not least, Stalin will reinstate the aggressive Soviet policy of international expansion, and this will contribute to the outbreak of war in 1939 and eventually lead to the Cold War. To get our episodes ahead of time and to support the effort to make more content like this, join the Time Ghost Army on Patreon or directly at the timeghost.tv website. There you can also sign up to our forum for free. Links are in the description. If you missed our episode about how Soviet Russia loses against Poland, including Stalin's insubordination against Trotsky, it's right here. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Time Ghost and World War II on YouTube. World War II week by week starts September 1st, 2018. See you next time. Na zdrowie, towarzysz. Yeah.
Okay guys, that was Lenin's death and Stalin's rise to power between two wars, 1924, part 1 of 1. Yeah, I really don't care about Lenin's death. I don't care that he's dead and all that stuff. I'm not really interested in how the leader died and the conspiracy theories about how he died. That's got nothing to do with me. What's most important to me is all the innocent people who died. They died because of what they believed in. They died because of the religions they followed. They died because of the political affiliations they belonged to. They died because simply they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were taken to concentration camps. They were murdered there. You know, they were killed in their homes. They were assassinated. They were poisoned. All of these people were killed by these supposed heroes of Russia, murdered. And even after they overthrew the monarchy, it just continued. The bloodletting, the destruction, the death, it just continued. You know, they took Karl Marx's ideas and they made it into a monster. They turned it into a monster. And wherever he is, probably in the afterlife, he must have been weeping, crying, saying, how could they use my ideas and turn it into this? This is not what I dreamt about. This is not what I meant when I said that, you know, the working class will take over the middle class and upper class of society, and we would have a peaceful and prosperous society, you know, where we all share things, where we're all in a community of sharing our existence together. This is not what he wanted. Not like this. Not all of this death and destruction. And really, it should be no surprise to Lenin that Stalin would become this person, this aspirant to become the new dictator of Russia. He should not be surprised. From when he was young, when he was doing his own political activities, Stalin, he was doing very violent political activities, you know, organizing these protests in a very violent fashion and manner, you know. And then after that, he went into criminal activity with his gang, killing people, taking their money, extorting money from people, kidnapping children to get ransom money. So all of these people, they should know that they're all monsters, not only to themselves, but they're monsters to everybody in society. So whatever dreams and ideals that they might have had, like Lenin and Stalin, it doesn't really matter, because ultimately it's whoever wins that battle. And Stalin was the one who won that battle. And yeah, I just really don't care about these people and their ideals and their dreams of having this communist or socialist society, because really it just never came to fruition. What we had was just a monster being born, and this monster devoured so many nations, so many people. It hurt, it killed so many people. Yeah. Guys, yeah, that's it for today. If you like the video, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye bye.